Hello, ladies and gentlemen. How are we doing tonight? This is Ben. Sorry for the little delay there. As always, some slight technical things to work out, but luckily we are ready to roll. Hope everybody's doing okay tonight. It's raining here in beautiful, sunny, not so sunny San Diego, and lucky me, I left my windows on my car open today, so that was fun to come out to at the end of the day. But other than that, everything's pretty good. Sorry, let me just adjust the old camera here a little bit. Make sure that we're not looking directly up my nose, ideally. So yeah, welcome. Hi. We are here to do another episode of the Ravensdale Roleplays Ravnica Behind the Screens, or Behind the Screen, I guess. Hopefully you liked our little splash page. I put that together in PowerPoint myself. Yeah, I'm talented. But this is where we are going to basically every Wednesday, we're going to sit down and we're going to plan out the next session or maybe the next session or two for the Ravnica live stream campaign that we're doing on the last Sunday of every month. In case it needs to be said, Samson, Sophia, Andrew, if you're watching, shame on you. You should log off now. Although I appreciate the support, thank you very much. I guess you could stay logged on and just mute it and close and minimize the window so you can't see anything. That wouldn't be objectionable either. But yeah. So we did a little bit of work on this last week where we decided kind of what the general story was going to be. So we've got the Changeling Spy and this kind of like independent organization that is trying to keep the guilds in check. Now, I actually stumbled across something that I felt was kind of interesting in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica book related to House Demir. And that is that they are often completely unawares of what other members of House Demir are doing. They're not really a guild where, Demir people come and hang out and, share stories of, the time they pulled one over on the guards and blah, 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 blah. They are very isolated from the rest of their guild. So I thought what might be interesting is if the organization is basically like a Demir plot. So not a plot, but it was one of House Demir's efforts to try to curtail the efforts of the other guilds. But of course, because they were not, they didn't want to curtail their own efforts, and so they basically used the organization to go out and undermine the other guilds while feeding them, minimal information about other Demir agents so that they didn't catch on to what was happening. So it's a Demir front for undermining other guilds, but here's the trick: the Demir agent in charge was killed. Nobody else knew what he was doing. So the organization kind of just kept on keeping on. So it kind of ties back into, Demir a little bit in that if the players kind of end up investigating Demir really heavily, they may stumble across this connection, which would be an interesting bit of role playing to kind of see how they and the NPCs in the organization handle this revelation. So I think that would be kind of fun. I think we're gonna go for that. But anyways, let's see. So one of the things that we have to do, we talked about the different like plot hooks, the avenues of investigation the members could take, and that was, we want to introduce the characters, organizations, plot hooks, and okay, so we looked at ways that they could get the information that they need. So the first one was gathering information by talking to guild members that have been blackmailed. They've got names can be given by the secret organization, the guildless organization. And they can go start talking with those people directly if they'd like to. There's also a thug from Krenko's gang that's on the run from someone or something, basically on the run from the Changeling after seeing them change form. Went into hiding, and there's a Boros soldier that's kind of like, aware of what's going on. But the rumor on the street is that the thug stole something from Krenko, who sent people out to kill him, and so that kind of there's a tie-in for that. It's just a slightly roundabout kind of side questy way of getting the information. They can go to the site of the theft. This is one that I'm still kind of trying to tweak and work out. I'm kind of thinking this would be the kind of thing where... Okay, yeah, actually I already put that idea down there. Okay, cool. So this one requires some additional, tweaking and fleshing out. But the general idea is solid. It's just a matter of figuring out exactly the specifics. So I think at this point, what I really want to do is I want to start writing up some of these NPCs. Sorry about that. Bit of a cough there. So yeah, I want to start writing up some of these NPCs. Now, the Changeling Spy is going to be a little bit complicated because it's going to have a fair number of aliases, or is it alii? No, aliases. I'm pretty sure it's aliases. So the Changeling's going to have a few aliases and personalities and covers and stuff like that. So we're going to have to figure out what all those are and kind of how they play in. I'm not one of those DMs who feels like absolutely everything needs to be planned down to the last detail, including like which days of the week they're pretending to be which person and, what their routine is all the time. That's fine. We can have a general idea of that kind of stuff if necessary, but I don't think it's a requirement. So, this changeling. Let's go ahead and, you know what? I'm actually going to open up another document. I just realized that this is document, not document. That's kind of bugging me. And you know what I need to do? I need to move to my drive. Sorry, a little bit of organizational stuff here. It's better to do it now than later. Move there. Awesome. So let's go back to my drive. Whoops, that's the wrong one. DM folder. All right. And then we're going to create a new document in here that is the Ravnica NPC document. All right. So first off, the Changeling Spy. So I think there are a few different things that go into an NPC stat block for my purposes. Name, description / concept, goal, allies, enemies. I like to just have a summary of those things kind of right at the beginning so that I can review it if necessary. More importantly, well, I don't know about more importantly, but just as important, we also have to have the stat block itself. So I'm going to take a look and see if we happen to have anything on 5e changelings that's available in... Okay, so D&D Beyond looks like it's got some information on the changeling race. So that's pretty cool. Charisma score increases by 2, Dex increases by... Or Dex or Intelligence increases by 1. Ooh, that's a tough call. I'm going to have to think about that one. They can change appearance. They gain proficiency with 2 of the following skills of your choice: Deception, Intimidation, Insight, Persuasion. Nice. Okay. So, all in all, they don't get a whole heck of a lot outside the norm, other than the change appearance thing, which is pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set up just the standard stats, right? So hold on a sec. We got strength, dex, con, int, wisdom, charisma. What's the standard array? 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 12, 10, 8, I think. And my cats are having a little bit of a dispute, so sorry if there's any noise in the background there. D&D 5e standard array. 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8. Yep, there it is right there. Okay. All right. My my amazing wife, and I say that non-ironically, she's legitimately amazing, and she's a wonderful cook, has decided to go all out and cook herself Totino's pizza rolls for dinner tonight. She is extremely excited about this. So sorry for the scraping sound you heard a moment ago. It was just her um, claiming the spoils of her efforts. So this is the standard array. Remember, these guys get +2. Oops, +2 to charisma and +1 to dex or int, and we'll figure that out kind of as we go. Now, there may be a monster stat block that already kind of does what I want, but for this character, because they're kind of central to this particular storyline, I'm actually going to go ahead and just build it out like it's a PC and have them serve as, or have that serve as kind of the stat block. As far as what class we're going to go with, I think it's pretty obvious we're going to go rogue, right? At least one class of rogue, if not a couple. So yeah, I think for this particular character, strength is probably the lowest rated stat. They don't really rely on being physically powerful. Charisma is going to get an automatic bump, so I say we toss the 14 in that. With the +2, that becomes a 16. So they're really good at influencing people, lying, things like that. So we've got those two stats taken care of. I feel like wisdom is probably going to be super important as well. So I'm actually going to do something a little bit crazy, and I'm going to toss a 15 into that because I want it to be a good stat for this particular character. Then Constitution also probably isn't as important. Extra hit points are always nice, but you can't always afford that when you've got so many other things you need to be good at. And then from here, I think we're going to go a 13 into Dex with a +1, giving it a total 14 Dex, and then the Intelligence is going to be 12. Since it's not actually a spellcaster, it doesn't necessarily need that as much, and we'll make sure that we give it proficiency in any skills that would make sense for it to have. So yeah, that's pretty good, I think. So let's do strength 8, dex 14, con 10, int 12, wisdom 15, and charisma 16. Yeah, we'll stick with those stats. I think that's pretty good. So we're going to go rogue, and let's see here. We want the Wikipedia for 5th edition. So as a first level rogue, they're going to get a D8 hit points, I believe. D8 hit points. So HP is going to be 8. I actually think we're going to make this character more than a first level rogue, though. I think we might even jump to 3rd level rogue because that gives the character an archetype and a few more tools at their disposal. So let's go rogue 3. And I think we're going to do... So we're just going to take the average hit points. We're not going to roll for them. So that's going to be 4 plus 1 is 5. So times 2 is 10. So that's going to be 18 hit points for our level 3 rogue. This may get adjusted a little bit up because I know that this isn't the way most monster hit points work, but it'll be fine for now. So let's do that. I guess if I wanted to go crazy, I could always do a 4th level, but no, because then the character is like 2 levels above the players. That might be a bit much. I don't know. We'll think about it. Right now, we'll build it out as 3rd level. So saving throws are Dex and Intelligence. So those will kind of help the character out a little bit. Dex and Int proficiency. Okay. And then, of course, we get 4 different skills. And in this case, I think the social skills are going to be what's really important for this character. So we definitely need Deception. Insight, I think. I think, persuasion and sleight of hand. Sleight of hand? Sleight of hand? Sleight of hand. Although, now that I think about it, so actually, deception, insight, and persuasion are all on the list of changeling skills that they become proficient with. So we can count 2 of those from the changeling class feature, or the changeling racial feature, and then we can go ahead and add in a couple other ones for the class itself. I think in this case, investigation makes sense because they're kind of got to, like, if they're sneaking into places to steal stuff as a spy, they need to be able to find secret doors or compartments, things like that. So that makes sense to me. And then I also feel like performance or persuasion. Let's do persuasion in that particular case because I think that's applicable. And then we're giving the character a background as well. So backgrounds usually give 2 to 3 skills. So they get 2 from their race, they get 4 from their class, they're going to get 3 from their background. We're going to go with stealth, we're going to go with performance, and we're going to go with acrobatics. So playing to the character's stat strengths for sure, kind of stacking the deck a little bit in their favor. Now, as a rogue, we do get expertise for a couple of things. In this particular case, I think deception is going to be kind of the key thing for this character because they have to be really good at that in order to do what they're doing. Oh, I got persuasion in there twice. This one should be perception. All right. So the other the other expertise, I think I want to go. So of the important skills, intelligence is the lowest one, and they have investigation. So let's go with investigation. Kind of short up. We want to do pretty good at everything rather than really good at a couple things and kind of subpar in everything else. So the asterisk denotes expertise. Whoops. Okay. All right, so that's good enough for now. I don't have to go into too much more into depth with these with the stats. That stuff I can do offline because it gets kind of boring. But we have at least an idea as well. Actually, hold on, I take that back. We do need to figure out the archetype that this person's going to get. Let's see. The inquisitive. Use bonus action. Check to spot a hidden creature or object to make an intelligence investigation check to uncover decipher clues. So bonus action to spot hidden objects and everything. That's pretty cool. It's kind of scouty. But I don't know that it fits this particular character particularly well. So let's see what else they've got. There's the scout. Thief, I think, might be a really good one. They can climb more easily. They... Interesting. They can jump more easily. And they can make... Oh, okay. So the fast hands feature of the thief basically gives them... the ability to take bonus actions to do dexterity, sleight of hand checks, use thieves' tools, etc. So being able to do that as a bonus action is pretty cool. I think we might go thief. And this is where copy-paste helps. There we go. Awesome. So we'll figure out equipment and everything like that a little bit later. But for right now, that gives us an idea as to what the character is capable of from a mechanics perspective. So allies, we've got Krenko. Technically, you could argue the Simic would be allies. Um, and then, of course, they can call on allies in other guilds because they've got those different aliases. And then enemies, they're not particularly popular amongst the guilds in general. So I don't think we have to go into much more detail there. They're just not well liked by most of the people in power. So the goal, what is the spy's goal? I know they're currently gathering information, but why? Are they mad at somebody? If so, who are they mad at? We'll figure that out in a minute. All right, so name. Are there any good name generators out there? Sure, I guess that's what I meant. So fantasy name generators. Let's go with Changeling. I don't really like those. Uke. Pate. Mirt. Neats. Niets. I think Niets. I like that. Niets? Maybe Niets. Let's go with that. So Niets. And then, of course, we've got aliases. So we're going to need to figure out aliases in a couple of different guilds. I don't think we need to come up with an alias in every guild. Most likely, certain aliases have already been compromised by Niets going in and stealing some stuff or blackmailing somebody. So I think those aliases have probably been exposed to some extent. So instead, I think what we should do is we should just do aliases for like maybe 2 or 3 guilds, at least to start with. We can always build some more out later if we want to. But I feel like we should have a Boros alias. I feel like we should have a. I think we should have a Demir alias. I think that'd be kind of cool because not all Demir agents are actually spies. Some of them actually do the jobs that the organization acts or use as like cover stories or fronts. So it could be a librarian or a courier or something like that. And I think actually I like that a lot. Let's make a courier because that gives the character a kind of a convenient Deus Ex Machina style excuse for being in pretty much any location. So I like that a lot. And then we should do something a little bit crazy, like maybe they've got a Rakdos alias as well. So that kind of gives the characters a reason to go and investigate the cult of Rakdos. That so far they otherwise don't have any reason to go and investigate. So, at least I don't think they do. Let me check that. Nope. Nobody in Rakdos yet. So I like that. That'll be kind of cool. Actually, I think. Ooh. It might be kind of interesting to even just kind of say that the Rakdos in general probably know some of what this character is up to and they're okay with it, but we'll figure that part out later. All right. So we've got that NPC kind of built out. The other NPCs I don't think we need to build out as strongly. Like Krenko and his thugs, those are detailed in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. So I don't necessarily need to do the footwork on that. I just need to flip to the page, which is really nice. So we can kind of cross off the Krenko's gang part of, encounter building. Or not encounter building, but stat building for the NPCs. So we don't have anything here that's like just explicitly they get into a fight. And I think that makes sense because the Boros are out there kind of patrolling the streets in most parts of Ravnica. And so any fights would potentially just land the characters in jail. They'd probably try to avoid that as much as possible. Probably. which of course means that the second we start the first session, they're going to get into a fight with somebody and get arrested. But, that's fine. We've kind of built out this particular storyline so that they can get information even if they're in jail. So it kind of works out. All right. So we've got that information. I did make a note of an encounter that I want to build out in an Is It Foundry. I think it would be a lot of fun to have, forced movement that's the terrain is causing them to consistently move around and change targets and stuff like that. So we'll keep that in there. Again, I don't think it's something I'm going to introduce in the first or second or even maybe third session, but sometime before the end of this little kind of mini story arc, we're definitely going to include that. But what else do we want to do? Well, let's start naming people out. I think that's kind of a big thing. So first off, this guildless organization. What is this organization called? Let's see. So let's use thesaurus.com. See if we can't find a couple of good ones. I like hoax. I think I'm going to include something. I think I'm going to include something along the line of hoax in the name. The question is what? Stratagem. Nah, maybe not hoax. Maybe that's not the right word. I thought it might lead us in the right direction, but I'm not coming up with anything that I really like. So this is a tough one. False colors. Misrepresentation. Pretense. Semblance. Maybe a play on independent. Autonomous. The autarchical. Autarchic. That's kind of cool. Means absolute. Meh. No, I'm not a big fan of that either. How about neutral? Let's try some play on neutral. We can't just, call it the guildless or anything like that. That's a little bit too it's a little bit too young adulty, like Maze Runnery, or not Maze Runnery, but like Divergent, generic. This is probably a bad thing, but it ultimately doesn't mean something bad because it means you're an independent, free-thinking, strong-willed person. Not that there's anything wrong with the Divergent stuff inherently. I'm not super familiar with it. I just, it strikes me as something that would be used in that kind of a setting. So, neutral. Let's see. Unaligned, unconcerned. I'm pretty no, I don't like that stuff. Uninvolved. Ah. Huh. What about Acromus? I kind of like that. Because achromatic is without color, right? Relating to employer doing lenses that transmit light without separating into constituent colors. Or literary, it's without color. I mean, we're looking at magic, so trying to name an organization that is hi Kashra, by the way, thank you very much for tuning in and chatting. Trying to name an organization that is basically trying to keep the guilds of Ravnica not like it's not trying to destroy them or unseat them. It's just trying to keep any one guild from gaining too much power so that, kind of the status quo maintains and, no one guild ends up becoming the absolute authority on Ravnica. I'm thinking achromatic or what is it? Achromus? Acromus? Not quite sure the pronunciation on that, but I will figure that out. But I just think that it's kind of a cool cool word that isn't something you hear in everyday conversation often enough that to kind of lose a bit of mystique. So, and again, we're in the Magic the Gathering kind of setting, so that's all about the five colors. So saying that something is achromatic means they're not associated with a color, so that kind of that denotes a lack of affiliation with a guild. Yeah, Acromus. I like that. So we're going to call it the Acromus. Is that the right spelling? Achromous. Yep. All right. Cool. Always nice to make a little bit of progress with that kind of thing because, secret organizations, they have to have a name that's evocative and interesting, but of course you don't want it to be so out there that it doesn't make sense or kind of fanciful that you constantly forgetting how it's pronounced or anything like that. Yes, I know I just said I don't 100% know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I will figure that out before the game starts. So once I know, it's a real word, so I won't forget it. All right, so the acromus, that's cool. Cashier says nobody knows what it means. It's evocative. Yes, yes, indeed. For a split second, I almost forgot that I was streaming and started singing the song that is a reference to, but it's for the best that I not do that. So, all right, so we've got the name of the organization, which is great. We'll start kind of replacing everything. We're going to need to figure out the name and identity of the kind of primary contact that the PCs are going to have. And I think for that, let's make them an interesting race because Ravnica is all about different races. It doesn't have to be a human. We could make them an elf. It's a little bit generic, I think. Don't get me wrong, I like elves, but you see them in pretty much every other setting. I think it would be really cool if we went with a Loxodon. Loxodons are the elephant people in Ravnica, and I think they're a really cool race. And I think it kind of makes sense that, a Loxodon is kind of taking the time to think ahead, realize the big picture, and kind of take steps to protect people you know, um, in whatever way this particular individual sees fit. Awesome. I'm glad you like the choice, Kashura. Thank you. Okay, so the Loxodon. Now we're going to have to go over to the NPC document, and let's kind of do a similar thing here. Now, for this guy, I don't foresee him being a combat character, so I don't think we need to come up with like stats and everything for him. That may change if the players decide they don't like him and decide they want to set out to kill him. We'll see what happens. And I say him, it may not be him, but just referring to the character in vague terms. So the concept or description is he is a Loxodon, not a malcontent, but he's a Loxodon, not a rabble rouser. Let's say a dissident, because he's not in agreement with the guilds as they are. His goal is to enforce the guild pact through indirect means, including sabotage, undermining of the guilds to prevent any one guild from gaining too much power. So that's his primary goal. His allies, he'll probably have a few allies. So he's got the entirety of the Acromus, Acromus. I think it's Acromus, is how that would be pronounced. So he's got the Acromus that are on this character's side, and they've got, probably some contacts in the guilds themselves, because I mean, it makes sense that if you're trying to undermine, you know, Demir, you go to the guilds and make contacts that don't, or make contacts with the guilds that don't like Demir, and then you go make contacts with the guilds that don't like the guilds that don't like Demir. Um, so kind of building a bit of a network, sort of a spy network type of thing. Obviously, the Luxodon probably doesn't go out and do it themselves because they're kind of big and conspicuous, but general idea. Enemies. I think Nietz probably doesn't like this Loxodon, probably knows that the Loxodon's after them. And then other enemies would be, um, kind of the guild masters, but in vague terms. So it's not that the guild masters are specifically after this character; they just are, they wouldn't approve of what they're doing and would probably have him killed if they found out. So, what we're going to do is we're going to find a Loxodon name in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. We're going to pop open to the Loxodon section because I don't know any good names for this race off the top of my head. What page is that? Page 17. All right. So, Lyusia, Fanor, Irij. Actually, I really like the names on this. Ilromov is a cool male name. Yulna, I like that as one of the female names. Vesmova, maybe. Sounds a bit Russian. Not that that's a bad thing, just Liuda. Liuda? Liuda. There it is. That's the one that rolls off the tongue, so that's what we're going to go with. Liuda. So, this particular character is a lady. For her, we'll have to define a personality, kind of make sure that we understand not just the goal, but also the individual motivations. So that's another thing we're going to put in there. What kind of motivations does she have? Why is she so interested in maintaining kind of the guild's balance of power, So, huh. The Luxodon are fairly orderly types, as I recall. So, I mean, there could be just a generic preference for order and... Oh, that's a little bit too far. General preference for order in Ravnica overall. Relentlessly loyal, they believe in the value of community and life. Often found in the Selesnya Conclave, but not this one. Okay, so since they value community so much, we could say that she views Ravnica as a whole as her community, rather than so the city of Ravnica as a whole as her community, rather than an individual guild, right? So, whereas a lot of Loxodon, they are like, oh, my guild is my community, and so that's the most important thing. She looks at the city as a whole as, this is one giant community, and all the guilds kind of operate within it. So there's no reason that any one guild should have all the power. So, kind of trying to keep things where they're at. So I kind of like that. Looking out for the views of her community kind of through unorthodox means. Unorthodox Loxodon or Loxodon? No, that doesn't work. Never mind. So what other motivations? Does she have someone who was killed? I don't know. I think that's pretty common, and I see it as, huh. Well, hold on a second. So what might be kind of interesting is if, so she had a couple of friends, had, let's say, 4 friends as a child who grew up and kind of joined separate guilds. You know how childhood friends, they kind of grow apart and they go in different directions. Each rose to some level of prominence in their guild before being um, killed or discredited or just becoming, just losing direction. Just generally, like, she saw these people that she cared for join the guild and bad things happened to them. And so she wasn't able to protect her like close community of friends from, the guild's infighting, some of the backstabbing that happens in some of the guilds. And so she kind of saw this and was like, you know what? I can't get rid of the guilds, but I can prevent any one of these guilds from gaining too much power and enforcing their will on the city as a whole. So I kind of see that, you know, she's she's kind of driven by that, I think. I think that makes a lot of sense. Quiet. So personality, I think she's a relatively quiet person, um, stable emotionally, so she doesn't like get angry or anything like that very easily. She's a long-term thinker or planner, so she's not the kind to rush in unnecessarily. Doesn't rush into things. Um, what else about her? Hmm. Loves the city of Ravnica, and she probably has even like befriended members in of almost every guild, kind of recognizing what each guild offers to the community. So I'll figure out like what exact special knowledge she has. I mean, she's gonna have a lot of information, but as a DM, I always like to make sure that before I introduce an NPC, I actually have some idea as to. I just realized that this is not zoomed in. Sorry about that. Makes it a lot easier to read that way. That way, I bet. Um, I always like to have an idea as to what information my NPCs are actually going to have. Otherwise, it's super easy to accidentally let something slip from an NPC who shouldn't have known that piece of information. And a lot of times, players, they don't even notice. They're like, "Oh, they knew this. That's okay, fine," and they go off and do their thing. But every once in a while, you get that player who goes, "Wait a minute. How did what's his name know the secret identity of the Duke's impersonator? They must have been in on it the whole time." And then, of course, that adds, plot holes and all that stuff, and that's not ideal. So if they happen and they end up leading to an interesting kind of development in the story, that's fine. But I try to avoid it as much as possible. As far as having like kind of metagaming on the NPC's behalf, I guess you could say. So we've got to finish up the stats for Nyates. We've got to finish up some basic descriptions of Liuda, but I like kind of what we've got here. I think next week we're going to actually focus on building out the encounter, and that will involve some actual like maths, looking at the encounter guidelines for second level characters, specifically having only 3 second level characters. Um, because that's going to require a little bit more finesse in planning the encounters out, especially because I don't think any of them have any healing spells just yet. So, it'd be kind of interesting to see how, like, what we're kind of able to push as far as encounter difficulty. But We'll see how it rolls. I'll look into a little bit of that before the next session, so I can kind of figure out like, you know, um, what's too difficult, what's too easy for a party of 3. But something else we have to keep in mind is that this is a new class that hasn't really been tested yet in an encounter setting. So who knows? It may go well, it may go bad. I don't think it'll be a TPK, but you know, you always want to kind of address the fact that it could happen when you're planning an encounter. Kashra, yeah, I agree with you. I've definitely been in games where the person running things, the one who's supposed to be able to like tell you what's going on in the world, just doesn't actually care to keep track of any of that. And so as a result, they end up kind of just spitballing at all times. And I don't think there's anything wrong with improvising. As a matter of fact, I think it's kind of an important skill for a DM to have when for those instances where the players go, we're going to jump off the parapets of the castle and we're going to swim through the moat. And you're like, I don't have any moat related encounters ready, so I got to figure something out. But at the very least, you should know which NPCs know what, which NPCs are going to oppose the players if they do certain things. Just have general guidelines at the very least to keep things rolling. But every DM has their own style, I guess. It's not my style. It's not the style I like to play in, but that's me. So, we'll have to gather up the stat blocks from the Guildmaster's Guide for Krenko's gang, because I would prefer to have that information kind of ready available. But I mean, I guess it's there. So the way I like to run my encounters is I typically like to have 3x5 index cards for every character and every monster, and I write out the abilities and the stats and everything. Not everything, because that's a lot of information, but I write down the stuff that's most important for an encounter on the card, and then when we roll initiative, I put them in order of initiative rolls. That way, I just flip through the stack and I reorder them if necessary if someone delays their action. But otherwise, it's just a quick, easy way of being able to note down like someone is poisoned or someone is taking this kind of damage or whatever the case may be. So I'll probably do that prior to the next session with Krenko's gang. And then once I finish rolling up Nyat's stats, or kind of putting them together, I'll do the same thing for her. Otherwise, most of the enemies that I think we're probably going to use in at least this first few sessions, they're all here in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica or the Player's Handbook or wherever they might be. So they've got like the generic soldier stat block here that can be co-opted for most of the different guilds, which I really like. And one of the cool things about the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica is that they actually give little lists of, and they actually include the challenge ratings of different creatures that you're likely to encounter when you're dealing with a specific guild. So, for instance, if you're running into the Gruul, you might fight a half ogre or a lizard folk or, a rubble belt stalker, which is something from the Guildmaster's Guide. So that can be really cool to kind of keep the flavor of a guild without having to go through and put together your own list. They kind of provide that for you. So I'm a big fan of that. I'll probably make good use of this if they decide to go and get into a fight in, Rakdos territory unexpectedly. I'll just probably flip it open and figure out what kind of things they might run into, and I'll populate an encounter with that. But again, it never hurts to prepare, so I will go through and identify some different stat blocks that I think would be particularly interesting in the context of this story and kind of the plot that we've already established. And then, of course, I'll probably, throw it out the window once the players decide to go do something else entirely. But at least we'll have it if they do decide to play along. So, yeah, I'll take a look at that later. But, I feel like we didn't get quite as much done this time around because we were looking at names. That always takes me a little bit to come up with something that I really like. But we did define Liuda and Nyats. The next thing we've got to do is we've got to focus on the 3 people that have, recently been blackmailed. So we need the Selesnya blackmail victim, Whoops, that is all one word. Blackmail. There we go. We need the Azorius blackmail victim, and we need the Is It blackmail victim. So that's good. We'll make sure we figure out what's going on with these guys. I think for the Is It blackmail victim, I kind of like the idea that I think the Is It blackmail agent should be a Dimir agent, kind of infiltrating, yeah. The Is It sending experimental secrets back to Dimir, but also selling some on the side. So, whoops. So Nyax has been blackmailing this agent. So Nyax has been blackmailing this agent by basically saying, hey, I'm going to tell the Is It that you're a spy. And then, like, kind of got some cooperation out of that. And then once the agent was like, okay, I'm not playing this game anymore, they're like, oh, I'm also going to tell the Dimir that you've been taking some of the secrets you're supposed to give to them and selling it to whoever they're selling it to. Kind of making them go, oh, I don't want the rest of Dimir mad at me too. Crap. And, feeling forced to kind of play ball. And of course, it kind of makes it a little bit more interesting in that the Is It character, the Is It NPC, is going to be less forthcoming with information. But again, good role playing, some really good roles. They might be able to ferret out some information from him. So I think that makes kind of an interesting dynamic where they're trying to help him, but of course he's resisting it a little bit because he's got his own invested interests. And I like that. I think that'll play well. So that's just some basic observations about this particular character. We have to figure out more about him, but it's nice to have at least a little bit of a plot hook, something interesting that gives the NPC something kind of memorable in their characterization. So we'll go with that. And then otherwise, we'll figure out these other two characters over the next couple of sessions. So the next D&D game is the 27th, which is, or not the 27th, the 24th, which is actually less than 2 weeks away. Okay, well, that means I'm going to have to get working on this sooner rather than later. Hold on a second. How many more Wednesdays we got before then? Just one more Wednesday. So some of this work will have to go on, offline, and then I can kind of recap what I did between now and then. But most of that will probably be encounter building. The actual like writing and stuff like that we'll do on screen next week. So actually, I just realized we've actually got a couple minutes left. So let's rock some of this stuff out. Let's detail the Selesnya victim. I think we had said in the campaign document that so the victims or targets have a reason not to go to the authorities. So we kind of cover that for the Is It. We had 2 NPCs who are resistant to the player character help and one who's more open to it. So we've already got one that's resistant to their help, kind of in the bag. So now, how do we feel about the Azorius character? What plot hook or what blackmail material did they have against them? So the Azorius are a guild that's really focused on law and order, kind of keeping to the letter of the law, making sure that the rules are followed and everything like that. They basically serve as the judges, the juries, the lawyers, etc., for Ravnica as a whole. I feel like what we might be able to do. Where's the Azor? There it is. So Azorius contacts. That's not what I'm looking for. There's a section in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica where it talks about villains for different guilds, And I almost feel like we might be able to find some good inspiration there. So let me find it. Here we go. Azorius villains. Ambitious authority figure seeks to achieve a higher rank. Venal judges' rulings are swayed by bribes and favors. A vengeful imperator persecutes. Maybe they took a bribe to influence a trial. So Casher is recommending that the character took a bribe to influence a trial, lose some evidence, or something along those lines. Ooh, I like losing evidence. That's kind of a cool. Okay. So that's a great suggestion. Thank you for that one. So took a bribe to misplace evidence that resulted in a well-known criminal being released. Oh, here, how about this? So, criminal was then murdered, and the Azorius, let's say juror, was framed for the crime by, I don't know how involved. Yeah, so let's say the Azorius juror was framed for the crime by Nyates specifically, to have additional leverage over him. Basically, Nyates impersonated the juror when killing the criminal, but has suppressed witnesses so far. So basically, like, Nyates shows up, bribes the juror, because the Nyates kind of realizes. I think he came up with it at the same time, but I'll take the credit. No, you definitely were the one who recommended the bribe and the lost evidence. I was kind of in the same vein, but I think in particular the lost evidence is the key part. So in this case, I think Nyates basically impersonated or showed up to the juror and was like, "Hey, here's some money if you misplace this piece of evidence." The juror took that, and then the criminal gets off the hook. Nyates then goes and kills the criminal when, as disguised as the juror, and then has basically kind of been, telling the juror that he will stop suppressing the witness statements if he doesn't cooperate with his demands. So that way, again, he's kind of got the character on two counts. One is the fact that he took the bribe in the first place, and two is the fact that he basically can frame him for the murder and be like, yeah, there are witnesses that say it was this guy, so he could get into some serious trouble as a result of that. So I like that. It's kind of a two-pronged blackmail, and again, kind of gives differing motivations for this character being willing to cooperate or not, as the case may be. Excuse me. And then finally, the Selesnya victim. So I guess the Selesnya victim is the one that's going to have to be more cooperative. So regrets mistake and wants to make amends, let's say. But the question is, what is that mistake? What would a Selesnya conclave member do that, or what could they have done that makes them hesitant to go to their conclave or their campaign, or no, not their campaign, their guild, and kind of admit, hey, this is what happened, but still be willing to accept the help of strangers in the form of the players? Let's take a quick look at what we've got for the Selesnya Conclave. Communities of the Selesnya Conclave are a harmonious union of nature and civilization. The members of the Conclave dream of embracing all of Ravnica in their peaceful union. In the meantime, they are growing an army, preparing to resist the ambition and destructive impulses of the other guilds. Okay. So community is a big thing for the Selesnya. But then again, so is kind of maintaining the natural order of things and safeguarding nature. So it would kind of make sense that the Selesnya might have some overlapping like ideals with the Gruul Horde, which are all about. Hold on a second. Let me find it. I know how books work, I promise. No, apparently I don't. Yeah, apparently I don't. I cannot seem to find the section that I was looking for, which is kind of bothering the heck out of me because it should be right here. Oh, because the people who organized the book put Cult of Rakdos in the R section for Rakdos rather than under C for cult. I guess it makes sense because Rakdos is kind of the, the subject of that, but it still is mildly annoying when you're trying to figure out why the alphabetical organization of it is not correct. How about this? So the Selesnya victim tried to broker a small like alliance with a Gruul band. So the Selesnya victim was manipulated. So they sent a small they sent a small party of new Selesnya recruits to meet their new allies, and the recruits were all slaughtered. So basically, the Gruul were like, "Yeah, we'll totally be your friends. Yeah, send some more of your friends over here. We'll totally hang out with them," and then killed all of them because the Gruul are not necessarily the most law-abiding group of people, surprisingly. So, up the victim's involvement. So Nyates basically was like, "Oh, hey, this is a great opportunity." Comes in and erases all of this particular person's involvement in this little fracas, or fracas might not be severe enough a term. Cluster fracas. There we go. We'll go with that. So, and then basically goes to the Selesnya member and is like, "So, you got a bunch of people killed. You're kind of a bad person. You should, you should make amends for that." And kind of played into the guilt complex in order to continue being like, "Oh, they're gonna find out, and when they do, you don't know what they're gonna do to you. They're gonna kick you out of the Selesnya conclave. Everybody that you know and that you rely on is gonna turn their backs on you." Kind of playing on that loss of community fear that any Selesnya member would likely have, in order to convince this particular victim to go along with what's happening. Using guilt and threats of losing the conclave's support / membership. So yeah, I think that probably works as far as motivation goes for everybody. This one with the Selesnium could actually lead to a fight if the Selesnium member actually says, you know what, if you want my help, then you're gonna have to go and find this goblin, raiding party leader, and you're gonna have to kill him because of what he did to these people. So that could be a really interesting kind of lead into some more combat-oriented encounters. It might also potentially, because it's a goblin, it could lead them to Krenko and thus the thug. So if they take this, questioning the victims tactic, and that leads them, and they do well with that, kind of leads them in the direction of the ultimate plot, it could kind of loop back to that plot thread and then connect them to some other stuff that's going on. So I kind of like plot threads that kind of cross each other and sometimes connect with each other, so that if they latch on to one of them and they kind of make really good progress, that other plot thread doesn't necessarily get left behind. It actually still plays a part in the story. So I like that in particular. So yeah, awesome. We've got some of the major NPCs kind of, at the very least, broad strokes identified. Got to figure out names, got to figure out, genders, races, all that stuff. But these characters more or less are just here as, expositional characters. So they don't need as much detail. Just a name, a race, a gender, and we'll probably be good to go. But I like that. I think that's a good stopping point for tonight. So Nyates, God, it's gonna take me a little while to get used to that. Like I said, if it's a made up name or if it's a made up word, I'm gonna get the pronunciation wrong repeatedly. So Nyates. Anyways, thanks very much for tuning in and watching. Hopefully this was interesting or entertaining. If so, please give us a follow. If you're watching this on Facebook, or not Facebook, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can find us on Instagram at ravensdale.publishing. And yeah, I hope you'll tune in next week, Wednesday at 7, for another Ravensdale Roleplays Ravnica Behind the Screens edition. And also next Monday, or every Monday, Samson, one of the players, he's actually playing the Naga in the campaign, if you watch the character creation session. He is going to be drawing a comic book while I work on writing a comic book, like the same comic book at the same time. And we do that via live stream on Monday nights at 7. So tune in for that too if you're a fan of comics. Thanks very much for the support, and we will see you next time. Until then, have a good night.